for Whitlam.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to be speaking on this important piece of legislation. It concerns national consumer mandatory credit reporting arrangements, and it's probably worthwhile explaining a little bit about how these arrangements work, Deputy Speaker. For a bank to pass on to, or any financial organisation to pass on personal financial information to a third party, they would need the owner or the party to whom the information relates permission. Otherwise, they would be in breach of the National Privacy Act and national privacy provisions. However, Labor has always considered that there was a consumer benefit in having a national credit reporting arrangement. We think it's pro-competition because it sets up a regime whereby we can have a standard and objective set of measures which enable a bank or another financial institution to assess the creditworthiness and the credit history of an applicant for a credit product. To enable such an arrangement to be put into place, clearly we needed to make some amendments to the national privacy legislation. Indeed, that's exactly what Labor did back in 2012. We put in place a comprehensive credit reporting regime by amending the Privacy Act 2012 to allow for credit providers to share repayment information with credit reporting agencies who can consolidate that information and then on-sell it to lenders. We believe it's pro-competitive, it supports competition in the financial industry, it allows small banks and lenders who do not have access to the significant amounts of information, perhaps the market reach, enables them to get access to financial data, making them able to make better lending decisions. And I make the point of identifying small banks and small financial institutions for this reason. Most of the large banks have already got this information. If they've been dealing with a customer for many, many years and they've got access to multiple financial product information and the repayment histories, they'll have that data. It's the small banks, Deputy Speaker, who won't have access to that data, and therefore when they get an application from a consumer who wants to switch banks, it's that much harder for them to assess their credit history and therefore their credit worthiness. Credit reporting also allows for increased price discrimination by lenders and may reduce the ability of people with bad credit histories to receive loans. And the legislation before the House in part goes to this issue. And let me explain this. The current framework for the Privacy Act does not adequately support transparency of credit reporting information and does not currently support all of the passing on of information that we think is necessary. And one of the things that has been identified is what is described within the industry as a hardship flag. Let me explain how that works. Let's take a very probable set of circumstances that are going to occur at the moment after the bushfires, the floods, even the hailstorms. Somebody has a credit arrangement with their bank, their property's been burnt down, their business has been burnt down. They're going to have a period of time out of work or with disrupted income flows. The bank knows that. The banks have, for the most part, put in place or published nationally their willingness to enter into hardship arrangements, suspend repayments, etc., etc. They go to their bank and they say, look, I need a holiday on my repayments because of this hardship. A good banker, and most of them are, will agree and put in place an informal suspension of payment requirements. For the most part, in those sort of hardship circumstances, where it's a natural disaster or some other unforeseen event, it won't constitute a variation to the credit contract. Credit contract remains in place, but there's an informal arrangement between the bank and the creditor. a hardship arrangement is flagged within the bank system, but it's not passed on to the credit reporting agency as a hardship flag. What is passed on is that the repayment history has been interrupted. What the bank actually passes on to the National Credit Reporting Agency is what is referred to as RHI, or repayment history information that relates to each and every one of those individual customers. So in the current bushfires, if we take that as an example, an informal arrangement is reached with your bank. You're not meeting your mortgage repayments. The bank will still pass on information to the National Reporting Agency, and that'll affect your that will affect your credit score. Now, this obviously has to be dealt with, and in the context of widespread disruption to economic activity visited upon businesses and households due to the bushfires, this should be urgent business. We should be dealing with this. This should be urgent business to ensure that the initial hardship visited upon by the natural disaster is not compounded by the fact that somebody has a hard-to-repair interruption to their repayment history information. We want to have that fixed. We actually were concerned when this matter came before the last Parliament, Deputy Speaker, that we needed to be cognisant of a review that was going on within the Attorney General's Department to ensure the feedback through the Attorney General's Department has been reflected in the legislation. Our initial view is that most of that has. However, Deputy Speaker, I do want to flag here that we won't be opposing the bill in the House. We support the general thrust of what is being proposed here, Deputy Speaker, but it is quite likely that we'll be moving. No, it is almost certain that we'll be moving some amendments in the other place. Labor believes that there is a need to ensure that the current credit reporting arrangements allow a more frequent and a more detailed access to the information on behalf of consumers. We want to ensure that consumers are able to have access about the information that relates to them. Two reasons: it's their information. Second, Deputy Speaker, there may be errors in the information, or there may be the need for them to repair some of that credit history information. So, Deputy Speaker, quite often when somebody is going to take out a new loan or apply for a refinancing of a loan, access to that information, the bank will have access to the information, the individual may not. So we want to ensure that they have that. Under current arrangements, the current framework within the Privacy Act, individuals are only allowed to access a free copy of their credit information once every year, and in certain other specific circumstances. In addition, under the current arrangements, credit reporting agencies have used loopholes within the Privacy Act to refrain from disclosing what are known as credit scores, RHI credit scores, Deputy Speaker. As a result, credit reporting agencies have developed quite a profitable side business in the on-selling of those credit scores, in fact charging customers to access the individual's personal credit history. We think it's the individual's information and they should have access to that, and they should have more timely access to that information. So the sorts of amendments that we will be proposing, Deputy Speaker, will allow individuals to access a copy of their credit information held by a credit reporting agency for free up to once every 10 days. They'll require derived or generated credit scores to be disclosed to individuals as part of their rights of access to credit information. They'll require the individuals to receive a statement summarising the key determinants of their credit scores, as part of their rights of access to credit information, and they'll allow the Australian Information Commissioner to create rules in relation to each of the above proposals. Deputy Speaker, these are propositions which are strongly supported by consumer advocates, and it is worth pointing out that similar provisions currently exist in New Zealand, and we don't believe, and on the information available to us, they'll impose any significant new costs on the credit reporting industry. They will, however, provide additional rights to consumers and additional competition benefits to the sector as a whole. Deputy Speaker, with these observations, commend the bill to the House. Hope it has a swift passage here, and look forward to progressing some of these issues that I foreshadowed in the other place. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for Whitlam. The question is that the bill be now read